Last video we tested out the experimental firmware for the Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K. We tested a Panasonic, a Sigma and a Samyang, and the results were surprising. You can watch that video on this channel, but I wanted to push it even further, and this is the Sigma 150 to 600, and today we're going to go and film some wildlife. But before we move on to those tests, this is for you ride or die depth of field dorks out there. So this is the Panasonic 50mm f1.8. Now the first test I'm going to do is with a autofocus continuous, and for these tests you have to tap on the back of the screen first, and that can be a little bit challenging. But all I do is I kind of aim for the center and up a tiny bit, so center of the screen and go up a little bit. So that will be generally where my face and my chest is. Now, once you've activated it, you should be able to stand in front of the camera and it will start tracking you. With autofocus continuous, if you move out of this box, you're going to go out of shot. Really good for products though, because you could hold up a product, bring it back down, and it will snap to focus. This is much quicker than it used to be as well. That's actually quite impressive. For these two tests, I'm going to make two different points. The first one being about turning your Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K into a vlogging camera, and the second one is going to be called shots fired. So first one, how have I turned my Blackmagic Cinema Camera 6K into a vlogging camera? All I've done is I've put a portable monitor on the top and I've turned it around. I brought a couple of cold tube mounts a while ago by Small Rig. I think they were under £10. I screwed that into the top of the camera. You've got to make sure you've got one that you can screw into the 1/4 inch mount on the top of the camera. And then you want to add your monitor. Now, I've got a little Portkeys P6 monitor. I don't think they make it anymore, but I absolutely love this little monitor. It's a 5-inch monitor. It's small, it's lightweight, it's got lots of built-in features like LUTs and focus peaking and exposure tools. Really great and inexpensive option. There are tons of monitors on the market. You shouldn't have to struggle looking for one. All I'm going to do is walk backwards and forwards. Now, in my testing, I don't think it works super smooth for walking backwards and forwards. I'm obviously looking up at the screen because I'm curious about this as well. And yeah, it seems to work pretty good. It's not bad at all. Let's test out the autofocus continuous mode. Essentially, all I'm going to say is this. Shooting at a deeper depth of field is equally as valid as shooting at a shallower depth of field. The reason for that is you'll often be in situations where you've got complex backgrounds. That means there might be lots of buildings, trees, places, people, just things going on behind you, and they can be confusing for your autofocus system. So it's really crucial to see that it can perform well in a shallow depth of field and in a deeper depth of field. So both tests are valid. Now, if you are an aspiring creative or filmmaking professional, then you need to hold on to your hats. Shooting everything in the shallowest depth of field isn't cinematic. It's lazy, it's amateur, and it's uninspired. I'm sorry to be the one to break it to you. Depth of field plays a crucial and critical role in narrative storytelling. Yes, there are occasions where you're going to need to completely blur out that background to isolate your subject. But doing that all of the time is just ridiculous. Being able to see your background, the mise-en-scene, it tells the rest of the story that you should be trying to tell in your filmmaking. If you don't believe me, and I'm no one with a tiny YouTube channel, how about this? Find the biggest 3 films this year. If 50% of those films are shot with a completely blurred out background and you don't know what's going on, then I'll send you a box of chocolates. If you can't, maybe it's time to dust off the books or do some more research on why it's important to use depth of field to your advantage, how using deep depth of field and shallow depth of field can help tell a story. Okay, let's wind down a little bit. Let's wind it back a tiny bit. So before we finally get onto the Sigma tests, there are a couple of features that I wanted to talk about as well. Number one is the linear focus. This is something that really excites me. Again, sorry if I keep looking up at the screen, I'm just making sure all this is in focus. So the first thing was that linear focus. I absolutely love it. It makes focusing much easier. But Blackmagic, if you are watching, when you turn the camera off and on, that feature seems to adjust automatically, so it automatically turns back off again. If you could fix that for the final firmware, that would be fantastic. Secondly, there seems to be some features in here that I've not heard people talk about, and I don't think they were in the previous firmware. And that is when you are using autofocus, you can actually choose to bounce between different autofocus subjects in the frame. Real quick, on the top of the camera, there's 3 buttons that are function buttons. You can assign different functions to those buttons. So if you press the menu option, you want to go to setup, you want to go to menu 3 until you see this screen. Now at the top, you're going to see that there is a button on the touchscreen that says F1. That's the button we're going to be working with. So you can assign this to any of those function buttons, but we're going to work with F1 for now. Then at the bottom of the screen, you can actually see it says still at the moment. But if I go across one, we can see focus on detect face 1. So if I press the function button now, it's going to focus on that first face and it won't focus on the other faces, which is really, really important. Right, now we can go across to focus on detect face 2 and it will change which face. Finally, we can do focus on detect face 3. It will change that face and it will only focus on that face. A really powerful tool. Apologies to Blackmagic if this was in the camera before. I don't believe it was though. Let me know in the comments below if I'm wrong. Let's quickly go across now to my favourite. This is cycle through detected faces. Now this will allow you to actually go between face 1, 2 or 3 at the touch of a button. These are really, really useful if you're going to be doing an interview and you definitely don't want your focus to jump on the wrong thing, or if you've got a complicated background, like I mentioned earlier, you don't want your focus jumping onto some random person in the background. After that, you can actually choose to skip which face you focus on. So we could focus on face 1 and 2, but not focus on face 3. So 1 and 2. If I press it again, we can now go in and change that to face 1 and 3, and then we can change it between 2 and 3. So here are the tests you've been waiting for. This is my Blackmagic with the Sigma 150 to 600. Now, a few questions were asked in the previous video. This autofocus update is not available on the Cinema Camera 6K Pro. This is specifically for the 6K full frame. This lens here is a Sigma 150 to 600. It's an f5 to f6.3. And the reason we're doing a telephoto test is because autofocus systems tend to struggle with autofocus distances. Firstly, possibly the hardest test, that is AFC mode. Why is AFC mode the hardest test? Well, because it sets one square, you tap on that square, and anything in that square is in focus. However, if you move out of that square, you go out of focus. My camera is so far away from me right now that I can't tell what is happening. Even if I had my monitor on the top of the camera, I still couldn't tell if this was going in or out of focus. So how have these tests been in real life? Well, so far I found them to be very confident. So this mode in particular is really good for tracking animals. However, if anything goes in front of that tracking point, then it will focus on that instead. The quickness of that focus though, to snap from one object to the next, is really, really good. It's such a huge step up over what we had before. Now, AFS, as I touched on a moment ago, can be really useful because you can tap anywhere on the screen, and unlike the AFC mode, that autofocus point will kind of be stuck at that area in the screen. So how is this useful? If there is, say, an animal going from one side of the screen to the next, and then there's an object in the way, with AFS, then that object isn't going to go in and out of focus as you're trying to focus on the object. It will stay. As long as you are moving at the same relative speed, it will stay on that object. Now, AFC, on the other hand, is really useful in terms of tracking that object as it goes through the screen. So if you can imagine, as an object is moving from left to right in the screen, its distance may be moving towards or away from you, and AFC can account for that, whereas AFS can't. Let's give object tracking a go. Right, so the object tracking test did not work, and the reason for that is I have to be behind the camera to tap on an object in order to initiate that focusing mode. And then by the time I've walked all the way over here, I think it was still trying to lock onto the background, so I was out of focus during the entire shot. Well, Future Luke had an idea. To help with this object tracking test, we have the 1TB Delkin Black CFExpress Type B 4.0 memory card with a max read speed of 3630 megabits per second, a max write speed of 3130 megabits per second, a sustained write speed of 2020 megabits per second, and a video performance guarantee of a whopping 400 megabits per second. And to make your workflow as smooth as possible, I also sent over this card dock enabled CFExpress Type B card reader with a heat sink body design and blisteringly fast transfer speeds of up to 40 gigabytes per second. I've been using this combo for months now and I love it. You can find a link in the description, and thanks Delkin for sponsoring this video. As we can see, this mode is great for keeping the camera static, as the tracking zone can map to all areas of the screen. However, it can be confused by two scenarios: subjects moving at speed or multiple subjects on screen at the same time. I find tracking a single subject in this mode is greatly improved if you manually pan the camera with your subject at the same time. And if there are multiple subjects on screen at the same time, there is a new feature in this latest update. It's an autofocus freeze option, and this might help with subject jumping, though more testing is needed. So face tracking should hopefully be moving around the screen now, and hopefully we can get that on a recording on the second camera. And this has got me in focus. Now there's a really useful mode in the camera which I thought was really great thinking by Blackmagic, and that was the ability to cycle through autofocus modes, which we covered earlier. So if you are in a crowd of people, I think they thought about that, and you could use that to make sure you're cycling to the right subject. There's also another really neat implementation that they've made in the very latest update. So FYI, another reason why I've taken so long to do this and done so many tries is because they are actively working on the updates, and this is RC17, link in the description. So hopefully this has got me in focus now, fingers crossed, because these tests have been exceptionally difficult. And from what I can tell so far, the autofocus is quite confident. Now, you're not going to use autofocus for faces on animals, that won't work. Some sort of animal tracking may be really cool, Blackmagic. Now, this should have been enough time to hopefully give us an idea of how well this is done. And I don't know what the close focusing distance of this is, so just to give you some sort of idea, I'm not going to walk really fast because I think it will struggle if I try and go too crazy. But just to give you some sort of idea of how far away I am from the camera, yeah, this is a lot. This is a lot. This is 600 millimeters. Wow. And I think this might have been one of the most difficult videos I've done. Right, that last test was completely unplanned. I did not expect it to be able to track me all the way to the camera. Really amazing stuff, Blackmagic. I'm really happy about that. Now, these autofocus modes aren't perfect, and FYI, I wouldn't recommend downloading experimental firmware usually. I've done this because I really want to give it a test, but it's usually wiser to wait until final firmware, and then even then, give it a couple of weeks to make sure there's nothing that's going to brick your camera. So if you do this, it is at your own risk, and the link is in the description below. Now, the autofocus, it has been so much better than what it was before. I remember doing these tests in spring or summertime when they first announced an autofocus update for these cameras, and it just was not good. It was so bad that I just didn't even bother making the video. However, that is not the case anymore. They have really stepped their game up, but there is still room for improvement. What I would really like to see is some customization options. So just the ability to make the squares bigger or smaller. So if you want to laser in on something, say a very small object, maybe a songbird in a bush, or a big object, maybe some idiot who walks 20 meters away from their camera to film a video for YouTube, then being able to make that square bigger or smaller could be really useful. I also like the new implementation of, if you press the autofocus button on the back of the camera with one of these modes initiated, it will pull it into a manual focus mode, so it won't get distracted. Now, those tests I was talking about earlier with the animals going across the screen, that could be really perfect for that. Overall, Blackmagic, I think you do deserve to be applauded for this. This is a really amazing step in the right direction, and I'm very excited to see if you start implementing this in your other cameras. If you've enjoyed today's video, let me know in the comments. I would really like to know if you have a Blackmagic camera, any Blackmagic camera, and how you're getting on with it. And don't forget to subscribe. I am getting the hell out of here because my feet are cold and wet and I want a hot chocolate. So I'll catch you all next time. See ya.